Welcome to the Refurbishment Mastery podcast with me, Martin Rapley. If you're a property investor who is worried about paying too much for your next property, concerned that you don't know how to manage a refurb, or scared that you will be ripped off by a builder, then this is for you. In this podcast, I share over 30 years of experience of managing refurbishments and conversions to help you make more profit, save your time, and ultimately enjoy the process. On with the podcast. You should not be paying your builder before they start doing any work for you. Now, that's quite a brutal statement, and I'm sure for a number of you that you can't conceive a position where that isn't actually going to be the case. But apart from, and I'm not talking here about a small holding deposit, I'll come to those later on. What I'm talking about is builders that ask for a significant amount of money before they'll actually start the work. And in the, where are we now? 13 years or so since I've been building my own portfolio, I have never, ever paid a builder a penny in advance of them starting the work when I have been working on my own portfolio. I have worked with some clients who have agreed to pay their builders in advance, and that was primarily because these were historic agreements with builders that they have worked with previously, and they had a slightly different relationship with them. But if you're working with a brand new builder, there is no reason for you to be paying that builder in advance. Now, some builders will say that they need some money to actually set the project up and buy materials. I would say that's probably not the case. Ultimately, in the first week or two of the project, in most cases, they're stripping out an existing property. So there aren't really many materials they'll need to buy. They may need to get some skips in, and they'll need some tradesmen from a labour perspective to start clearing out your property. But at the beginning part of the project, there really isn't a lot of cost that the builders are going to incur and for which they need to have money in advance. Now, builders will definitely be spooked if you're not coming across as credible, if you're not coming across as a client that knows what they want, has got a clear, defined schedule of works, clear, defined drawings, then they're going to be spooked and think, here's someone who's going to mess me about. If they've messed around with the details they've given me to price the project based on, then who knows, perhaps they'll mess around with the money as well. They'll perhaps also be looking at this from if they don't know how to present me the right documents to price properly, then they probably don't know that they shouldn't be paying me in advance as well. So to some extent, those builders are trying it on. All builders are trying it on, by the way, if they're asking for money up front. A common reason that builders ask for money in advance to start a new project is because actually they've got cash flow problems. They need money from you to finish off the previous project because something has gone wrong somewhere with that previous project, or perhaps even historically further back down the line. And they are very much running a negative cash flow and in a position where any slight problem now could actually see the company having to be wound up. So you don't want to be dealing with companies that have got cash flow problems, because what if they can't get enough deposit from the project after yours to finish your project off, and now you've paid them most, if not all, of the money that you've agreed is the contract sum. And then some builders are asking for deposits because they can, because they know that so many clients will pay them money up front. I said deposits, really, it's more than a deposit. They might call it a deposit, um, but they're asking for it because they know they can. And I've actually had that conversation with builders in the past when I have challenged them. Now, let me just talk about sideways a little bit here about deposits. If some builders could realistically ask you to pay a deposit to show that you are committed for them to put your project in the diary. Let's say you've got a project now, you want it to start, or you've agreed with the builder that it can't start for 6 to 8 weeks or so. So we're not necessarily talking about a project that's going to start Monday week or something like that, but perhaps a project that's a little bit further down the line. It may not be unreasonable for the builder to say, I'll put you in, I'll pencil you in to start on this day, but can you pay me a holding deposit? Now, a holding deposit in many ways would be considered refundable. So the builder will refund it to you if their circumstances and situation changes. So don't be afraid to agree that. You would obviously forfeit it if you change your mind in that lead-in period, and that's what it's all about. It demonstrates that you are committed to the builder. It puts a little bit of hurt money in there for you, and ultimately it compensates the builder if you change your mind and don't want to start. But in reality, I would think a deposit is one, perhaps at the maximum, £2,000. It's not a huge amount of money. And ultimately, this is this whole risk of paying builders money in advance. You do run the risk of losing it all. In the worst case scenario, you can lose the whole lot. And I was having a conversation. In fact, I was talking about this very subject in a training course I was running a long, long time ago when I was running in-room courses before lockdown. Um, and delegates would come along and spend a day with me, learning, learning the principles of managing their own projects. And this conversation came up, and one of the ladies in that meeting said that she had been asked to pay a deposit in advance for a project that she was thinking of starting in a few weeks' time. The the work, the value of the work the builder had quoted was in the region of £180,000. And the builder had said, oh, there's all I need are three payments through this project. You pay 30% to get me started, you pay 30% in the middle, and then you pay the last 30% when I've finished everything. And I said to this lady, well, what is 30% of £180,000? And of course, that's in the region somewhere of 60 odd thousand pounds. And I said to her, well, if you pay that deposit and the builder disappears, could you sustain a loss of £60,000? And of course, the answer absolutely was no. And so where this story ran on was that for one reason or another, and I say one reason or another, I have no idea why, the lady did pay him £60,000 to start her project. And then a few weeks later posted on social media that this is what she'd done. And could anyone give her any contact details for this builder who wasn't answering his phone, wasn't answering his email, and didn't appear to have to be operating from the address that he told her. I don't actually know what happened at the end of the story because I've never spoken to this particular lady again. There wasn't anything I could add. I could have been sarcastic in a response. I wasn't, but interestingly enough, someone else who was on that same training course on the same day said, which bit of the conversation with Martin did you fall asleep during? Because Martin told you not to do that. Yeah, there we go. This stuff absolutely does happen. And sadly, this lady isn't the only person I've heard of who has lost a lot of money by paying in advance for works. And sadly, it's probably the more unscrupulous contractors that are actually going to ask for large sums of money in advance. And as a result, that may well be the first clue that you don't necessarily want to be working with this builder. Now, sometimes builders will ask for payments in advance, sometimes before the work actually starts, or sometimes relating to elements of the work as it's going through. Now, if that comes up, you need to be having a conversation with the builder as to what they are doing, why they need the money, and you need to understand what your risk it actually could be and see if there is a way of mitigating that risk. Now, common reasons that a builder will ask for some money in advance is because they have actually got to buy something and pay a deposit for it. So most of their companies, most of the companies they're working with will give them trade accounts. If you want to buy some new doors for your property, those doors are available on a shelf in a builder's merchant where your builder has got trade accounts. They won't need to pay that merchant straight away. As a result, that once the doors have been delivered, that you can reasonably pay them for those doors, and then they can pay the merchant. So in those situations, there's no reason for paying in advance. But sometimes you might need some bespoke made bifolding doors. Now, bifolding doors are all, well, by and large, always bespoke. You can get standard sizes if you're building brand new, but most of us are refurbishing existing properties. So the thing we need is non-standard in some cases. Uh, Bifolding doors, UPVC windows, they're the real common things. There could be some other specialist items if you want specialist fireplaces, some specialist kitchen things, bespoke kitchens. And in those cases, the suppliers will ask your builder for a deposit. And sometimes the builder will come to us and say, I need to pay a deposit. Can you pay me this deposit amount? Now, in those situations, I would not actually pay the builder because there is risk that the builder disappears. There's risk that the builder's business fails the following day. And so the easiest way for me to mitigate that risk is actually to buy or pay that deposit myself. And if I pay that deposit on my credit card directly to the supplier on behalf of my builder, so I phone the supplier up and say, my builder needs me to pay this deposit for these specialist windows. Can I make the payment? They will generally take a credit card payment over the phone from you. And as you're probably well aware, with a credit card, you have got some kind of recourse if the supplier, if their business fails. And of course, a lot of these suppliers are quite often running bigger businesses than your builder. So now you've bypassed the smaller builder that has got a higher risk of going into liquidation. And you've gone to the main supplier. That's not to say that all suppliers are sound by any means. They're definitely not, but you're perhaps at a higher level to reduce that risk. But significantly, if there is a problem, you've still got your credit card insurance that you can claim that balance back up against in due course. It's obviously some hassle, but at least you get your money back. Whereas with a builder, you could very easily lose it. And I hear builders all of the time. In fact, I was involved as a quantity surveyor on a project a number of years ago where the builder was continually looking for reasons to get money in advance, continually looking to overvalue the value of the work they'd actually done in any period. And I wasn't having any of it. I was engaged by my client to look after the finances and that was where I was, but I was telling my client what was going on. And my client one day said to me, look, this guy just needs some money. I think I'm going to pay him an extra £10,000 just to help him out because I think that will help my project run a little bit smoother. I said, well, if you want to do it, you do it completely off your own back. It's nothing to do with the formal contractual way that we're managing the financing on the project. It's nothing to do with me. And I would recommend that you at least get a piece of paper to say that this is what you're doing and you know that both parties are aware of it and how it gets recovered. That's jumping in to make sure that you have everything you need. Now, in a number of these podcasts, you would have heard me talk about my community, and I want to ensure that you know how you can join that community. Obviously, within these podcasts, there's a limit to the detail I can go into the recording, and of course, a lot of things are very generic. So, what if you had access to join me on a Zoom call for 90 minutes every single week in a group coaching environment? You could get your questions answered whenever they come up and learn from other members' questions. Plus, you also get 10 hours of training videos, an HMO refurbishment case study, some sample documents and checklists that will help you run your projects far more effectively. Membership of my community is just £89 a month. You get the first month free, and you can also cancel anytime after that. Plus, as a listener of this podcast, there's a promo code to help you save £20 every single month that you remain a member. So just make a note of VIP discount 20, VIP discount 20, all in capital letters, and put that into the checkout. You'll find the checkout on my website, www.refurbishmentmastery.com. Scroll down the page, you'll find the link for the Project Management Accelerator. Use the promo code VIP discount 20 and you'll be signed up at just £69 a month. I look forward to seeing you in that community very, very soon. Now back to the podcast. So she was happy with this. She decided that this was what she wanted to do. Friday afternoon, she paid the £10,000 on top of the amount of money that I'd already said was due to be paid. And on Monday morning, the builder wound his business up and disappeared with her £10,000. So she had unfortunately been manipulated into that situation. So when we got to the point where we had to find a new builder, my client was already at minus £10,000 because she'd already spent £10,000 against work that hadn't actually been carried out. Fortunately, because I'd been very firm on the true valuation, my side was absolutely right. But sometimes, so this is why we need to be careful about paying builders in advance, because sometimes they are trying to manipulate us into situations. But sometimes there is a bona fide reason. I've talked about a deposit situation there, but you can avoid that. Now, I took a phone call from a lady who tracked me down through social media, I think, and she rang me wanting help because her builder had asked for £10,000 in advance before starting the work, and she wasn't happy to pay the builder that. I think she'd heard me talking about something similar to this in the past. So I had a bit of a chat with the lady. She was actually local to me, and it turned out that I knew the builder that she was wanting to engage. And I said, not only do I know this builder's actually done work for me in the past. And as I said at the start of this episode, I have never, ever paid a builder in advance. And I said, what's interesting is I think this is one of the builders that's never even asked me for any money in advance, although frequently I'll have the conversation with builders as part of the tender process and make it clear that I'm not going to pay any money in advance. And if they're not happy with that, then I'm not their right client and they can go and work for someone else. But this particular builder that I knew of asked for £10,000 in advance. And I thought, well, this is interesting. So I said, well, leave it with me. Let me see if I can get to the bottom of the whole thing. So I rang this builder and you know, we hadn't spoken for a while, but we knew each other. Had a bit of a chat. Asked him what the situation was here. Reminded them that he'd never asked me for money in advance, and he said, "Well, this is a bit of a funny job. Um, I've got it was refurbishing. It was actually refurbishing a family house." He said, "But the first thing I've got to do is I've got to recover the existing roof. So that I can't really do anything at the moment because the roof is leaking. In fact, it was a family house that I think had been left in probate, so it had come down through the family. It had been empty for a while, and so he was basically saying the first work he needed to do was actually get a scaffold up and sort the roof works out. Now, this was not a small house." And it wasn't a nice square house. It was a rambling farmhouse. It was on sloping ground. It had light wells. So the scaffold itself was not the most straightforward scaffold. And what had happened is his scaffolder has said, "I want to be paid as soon as I've got this scaffold up, which will take me the whole of the first week to do." So the builder knew that he had to pay the scaffolder on the Friday of that first week. So to cover himself, he'd asked my client, the lady that had rung me, for the cost of the scaffold in advance. And that was £10,000. So now I understood what the reason was. I could then look at, well, how can we solve this little challenge? So I said to the builder, first of all, are you sure the scaffolding is £10,000? At which point the builder said, well, to be honest, Martin, it's only £8,000, and I added £2,000 on to make it a round number. Okay, so just by asking the question, we've now potentially reduced this liability of £10,000 to £8,000. So then I said to the builder, well, what if I got an agreement that him, my client, and the scaffolder all met on site on Friday, agreed that all of the scaffold was up, it had all been signed off as being safe to use, so that the builder could actually start work on the following Monday. And if everyone was in agreement that that was the case, my client would immediately transfer the £8,000 to the builder, so that the builder could immediately transfer it straight on to the onto the scaffolder. Remembering, of course, that most of the times there's a little bit of a lag in payments online, but most of the time for these small amounts, there's no lag. Most bank accounts, you'll see that those payments turn up within 30 minutes or so. But I said the criteria is that if it's not complete on Friday, then there is no money, i.e., the meeting only happens when all parties are happy that it is ready. And at that point, the money will be transferred. The scaffolder will have it within an hour or so of having that meeting, or maybe just a little bit more than that. So as it happens, all parties were happy with that. That was exactly what they did, and the project carried on. The lady who'd rung me, who I don't think I ever charged for this service, she got her she took away the risk of not paying £10,000 in advance. She did pay £8,000, but only when the scaffold was up. The builder didn't need to charge anything else. That other £2,000 disappeared, of course, in the end, because that was just the builder trying it on. And I wrapped his knuckles for that kind of attitude. And the job was all good. And the key thing here is I asked some questions and I negotiated to see if there was a way round to solve the solution. Now, just only a few weeks ago, I was asked by a client to put together some contract documents for a £750,000-ish project, £800,000, something in that kind of order. And so, yeah, not a problem at all. He sent me all of the builder's details. He sent me the builder's quote. And within the builder's quote was actually a requirement that the builder wanted 10% to start the project. Now, 10% of a £750,000 project is £75,000. My client said to me, I don't want to pay any deposit. I said, you shouldn't be paying any deposit. A builder that is of this size, and I'm bearing in mind we're working under a JCT form of contract, they should not be asking for that kind of amount of deposit. So when I put the contract documents together, I just didn't mention anything about a deposit or an advance payment. They're called advance payments in JCT. And I said to my client, let's start with just not putting anything in. When I sent the draft contract over, the builder, amongst some other questions and genuine queries and things, he said, what about the advance payment to get started? And I said to him, if you are a credible builder that believe you can deliver this £750,000 project, which we have placed under a JCT form of contract, and you need payment in advance for anything, then I've got to immediately consider that you are not a builder capable of doing this project, because I'm concerned that you haven't got cash flow behind you and you haven't got the accounts you need. At which point the builder said, all right, then fair enough, leave it as it is. Problem went away just by me suggesting that we wouldn't be placing the order if he wanted those kinds of terms, i.e., we took control of it. So when builders are asking you for payment in advance, if you don't want it, just tell them and go and get another builder. And you'll know that I've spoken on other podcasts, there's other episodes around about how to find builders, and I talk about finding lots of builders so that you've got lots of options. So don't be afraid to change your builder if you need to. So in summary, you may choose to pay a deposit, although I personally have never paid a deposit. If you do pay a deposit, it wants to be a nominal amount that if in the worst case the builder disappears, you're not massively out of pocket. If you are paying a deposit, ensure that you know how it is recovered over the duration of the works. Are you taking 10% off every single payment? Are you taking a percentage off based amount the amount of work that's been completed? What is that? Make sure you're clear. If the builder wants payment for anything more than a deposit, my advice is change builders or negotiate it away, as I did in that case I was just talking about. And in reality, just to remind you, I have never ever paid a builder in advance of them starting work. It is perfectly possible. And my advice to you is get that into your mind as the way that you want to operate going forward. And if the builders want payment in advance, 9 times out of 10, they are not the builders you actually want to be working with. And just as a little close up, the builder that I was putting those contract documents together with my client, one of the last conversations I had with my client is, I'm still not 100% sure that this is the right builder for you. His attitude has been odd all along, but you want to use him, so I've put the contract documents together. And my client saying, I think his attitude's a bit wrong, but I'm happy to go with it. Ultimately, you can make your own decisions. You don't have to take my advice, but my advice is don't ever pay builders in advance of them starting work anything more than a few £1,000s as a deposit. So good luck with your negotiations. Hopefully you can negotiate away builders that want payments in advance. All the best, and I'll see you on another podcast.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. Please do like, share, and leave a comment where you can. If you need any guidance or advice with anything to do with your refurbishments or conversions, then don't hesitate to reach out. You can book a free call with me by clicking on the link at the top of my website, refurbishmentmastery.com. There's other ways you can contact me in the show notes as well. I look forward to speaking to you again soon.